Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today as we discuss how to quickly and effectively meet your brand safety standard. It's actually a topic of conversation on top of mind with hoteliers. And to be honest, not all solutions out there are created equal, and some might not even meet your brand's strict requirement to keep your employees safe. I hope you all find today's webcast very informative and valuable. Just a quick look at our agenda today. As I mentioned, this webcast is going to cover workplace safety solution or hospitality panic buttons. This webcast will highlight 10 questions to ask while assessing your need for a safety solution, as well as features to look for and costly mistakes to avoid. So let's just dive right in. My name is Ryan Heideman. I am the Vice President of Sales here at React Mobile, and I've been at React for a little over 3.5 years, but I've spent the last decade in the software space. One of the reasons I joined React was because I could see the impact of protecting employees when they need help, when they're at their most vulnerable. We continue to do that day in and day out to make the world a safer place. It's commonly called panic buttons, employee duress, associate alarms. But what it is, in terms of definition, is a discrete wearable device that allows an employee to call for help at a moment's notice. When a panic button is triggered, the device should alert staff safety, security, and supervisors of their employees' precise floor and room location, allowing help to be dispatched to their exact location. These devices typically rely on Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and/or cellular networks to communicate real-time trackable location data to the responding parties. Where that employee is down to the room is critical in responding to an alert. Most solutions will have a way to provide a general vicinity information, but React Mobile uses Bluetooth beacons that we place centrally throughout each guest room and public area. These are all configured specifically to your property. Our technicians are trained to install and configure each one so that anytime an alert is triggered, it determines the exact room level location. You cannot afford to be guessing in the event of an emergency. By placing these throughout the property, this also allows us to track in real time if the employee moves throughout the property so you can respond accordingly. This is very important to have this installed professionally because this is a life safety device. You don't want to self-install this, just as you wouldn't self-install a fire alarm, sprinkler system, or smoke detector. Let's talk about identifying some of the employee risks. Hotel employees are especially vulnerable to on-site incidents due to the remote nature of their work. Lone workers are considered employees who work by themselves, indoors, outdoors, while driving or in remote locations, and are among the most vulnerable members of your team. In the case of hotels, cleaning and maintenance staff are often assigned rooms without the company of another staff member or supervisor. Not only is this work physically demanding in nature, which can result in accidental injury, but it places staff members in a potentially high-risk environment with guests behind the closed door of a guest room. In fact, a recent study from a regional hospitality association found that almost 58% of hotel workers report being verbally or sexually harassed on the job. This is absolutely unacceptable. And it's not just the risk for the employees, but there is definitely risk for the hotel as well. It's really important to recognize that the prevalence of workplace safety breaches across hotel properties does not just affect that employee, but the employer as well. For decades, the hospitality industry has suffered from uncharacteristically high staff turnover rates. This represents a significant cost to hoteliers as they frequently hire and train new staff. It's so serious, in fact, that there's an annualized employee turnover rate of 73% in the hotel industry today, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. With respect to staff safety concerns, an incident which causes a hotel employee to abandon their job often results in, staff compensation, legal fees, insurance premiums raised. Not to mention, the negative morale, worker retention, as well as, the time and resources to spend hiring that new employee. So really, failure to proactively address and prioritize hotel staff safety impacts a hotel's bottom line and in some instances can actually result in fines or even jail time for the employee who neglected this. Let's jump into some of these questions specifically. How to address assessing your business for a panic button. This first question is really, really straightforward. How would your staff communicate to you in the event of an emergency? In a stressful environment, an employee isn't always thinking clearly to be able to get out of a vulnerable situation. Make it simple and make it straightforward. Second, do you have location tracking? It's one thing to be notified of an emergency, but it's another to know where they are and how long they've been in that situation, as well as who on your staff is actually going to respond to an alert. Ask these questions as you evaluate a workplace safety platform. Are you providing the resources for your staff? This is important because software doesn't operate in a silo. It takes dedicated members of your team to help initiate the proper procedures. What is your commitment to responding to an alert on property? Is everyone trained on how the system works and what to do in the event of an emergency? These questions will help determine how to keep and maintain a safe working environment. 4, have you established a set of best practices? What have you documented in place today, and how will that change going forward? What if you have to notify medical or other third-party responders? Is your staff trained to do that, and how do you document that? 5, this is really a critical one. There are quite a few legislative mandates across the country, but make sure that your ownership and management group is aware of the over dozen cities and states that have legislation on the books requiring hotels to provide geolocation panic devices for all hotels that reside in those jurisdictions. Some examples, Illinois, Washington, New Jersey, as well as various other cities. And not only that, there's actually 4 states that are currently pushing legislation, as well as many more. So make sure that your ownership group is aware of what is actually going to be required of you, because these legislations are usually much stricter than maybe as simple as, kind of doing the bare minimum. All of these legislations have, as I said, strict requirements as well as repercussions if hotels don't comply. They range from, simple fines for each day out of compliance to even withholding business license renewal. So make sure you're asking these questions to your group, to your management group, as well as evaluating each and every vendor and asking those questions if they meet that strict city or state or legal requirement. Not to mention, if you're a union workforce, make sure that you're engaging with your union representative to the guidelines are there, so that the solution that you choose will meet all of the above. Are your buildings connected to other unsecured buildings? Even if you have access controls in place in your hotel, there's always an opportunity for someone to gain access who shouldn't. Be prepared and equip your staff with the right resources to call for help or identify any types of risks. Can guests easily gain access to employee-only areas? This is really important. If they are able to access back-of-house areas, that's a situation where they can interact and possibly have conflict. So make sure that they also are able to, carry any type of device with them until they are physically leaving the building and they're done with their shift. Stairwells and supply rooms. This is really critical. It goes beyond the guest room that they might be working or, doing various other responsibilities of their day-to-day. And they might find themselves in these areas, linen closets, stairwells. And if the situation happens there and they trigger their alert, are you able to identify where they are precisely and not just the guest room? Can employees at the front desk clearly see visitors? This is really important as well, because we know that certain situations like people with mental illness will come in the front door. And so having one at your front desk, even though you would think that that would be a very open and public area, they need to be able to call for help, especially if it's at, later in the evening and no one else will be there. They need to be able to call for help at the front desk, because it's the first area open to the public that they see. And the last one here is, are your staff washrooms used by the public? So really any area where the public can access and interact with an employee should be, identified as a potential place to call for help. And so make sure that these last 3 or 4 questions really identify that the building as a whole where people can interact with each other should be, should be able to be identified, and employees should be able to call for help. And it's not just specifically identified in the guest room. Simply stated, ignoring an industry-wide call to action will cost you. Hoteliers, ask yourself, are you doing everything in your power to keep your staff safe? Hotels can take advantage of next-gen panic buttons that are taking an integral step to protecting the brand, their business, and their people. Before selecting a panic button platform, we suggest you looking at the following features and services. First one is silent alarm. That's a given. You should not have to escalate a situation. It should be silent. It's why banks have silent alarms. You should also be able to verify and understand who is responding to an alert on property. It should be instantly activated. It should be confidential operation, really minimal footprint. We don't want to overcomplicate safety. We want this to be something to be thought of in the background and only necessary when you need it. And it should be easy to install and have dedicated support. The last thing I'll mention on some of the features that you should look for in evaluating a panic button workplace safety platform is also, importantly, one size does not fit all. Each hotel is unique. So ask if they have any integrations with your existing infrastructure as well. That really gives an indication of what this system might look like, or what a workplace safety solution might look like in 2, 3, or 4 years down the line. So making sure that they're looking at how they can interact with other technologies that you've already had installed or put in place or have on the books going forward. So let's take a look at some of the costly mistakes during implementation. Once you've decided on the specific vendor that is going to help support you in this really important initiative, make sure your hotel has adequate cellular and/or Wi-Fi coverage. If not, make a plan to upgrade those technologies, as those are the most common types of infrastructure that workplace safety systems run on. Also, make sure that the hardware as well as the system as a whole is led by a dedicated point person or department on your property. With turnover within the industry, you need to have a department who can quickly retrain any new employees, as well as troubleshoot any hiccups. So that's really, really critical, and where you cannot really spread this out to multiple people. You need to have a project department head or project point person to be able to identify this. System maintenance is also really important. Workplace safety system is very similar to insurance. You don't need it until you absolutely do. So make sure the system is tested and maintained regularly. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this was valuable for you as you evaluate a workplace safety platform, for your brand, as well as any legislative areas that you might be in. This is really important, critical. The QAs and auditors are starting to check based on your brand standard, and so they will come through. And as they check for the specific types of linens and things like that and procedures in place, the checklist is going to be, do you have a system in place to help keep your employees safe? And so if you have any additional questions, you can reach out to sales@React Mobile or email me directly at ryan.heideman@React Mobile. Thank you for your time today, and stay safe.